Alright, today we're looking at some problems involving percents with tax, and also looking at how those things look in equations. Alright, so the first question says, in a city in Ohio, the sales tax rate is 7.25%. Complete the table below to show the sales tax and total price, including tax, for each item. So they gave me the tax rate, 7.25%. But I need to know how to turn this tax rate into a decimal. Okay, so please make sure that you're taking notes on your paper. I need to change this percent to a decimal, right? We know that we turn a percent into a decimal, so let's rewrite the percent, 7.25%. We turn this into a decimal by moving the decimal 2 places to the left, right? So instead of being here, it's going 2 places to the left. In this empty spot, we're going to put a 0 as a placeholder. So this, as a decimal, 7.25% as a decimal is 0.0725, okay? So when I go to figure out the sales tax on a pillow that costs $8, I'm going to multiply this $8 by 0.0725, okay? So use your calculator and do that. Okay, when you put this into your calculator, you should get 0.58. That means the sales tax is 58 cents, right? So if I add the original price plus the sales tax, the original price was $8 plus 58 cents for tax. The total price is $8.58. Let's try the next one. Our tax rate is still 7.25%. We know we changed that into a decimal by moving our decimal 2 places to the left, right? So we are multiplying the cost times the tax rate as a decimal. Okay, put that in your calculator. What do you get? Okay, you got 1.595, but we would just round that up to 1.6, right? This 9 afterward would mean we would round this up. 9.5 would mean 1.6, so $1.60. Okay, so the original cost, $22 plus the sales tax, is $23.60. All right, do the last one. Hopefully you were able to come up with the sales tax for the trash can and also the price including the tax, right? Using the strategies that we used up here. We're going to move on to question 2. It says the sales tax in New Mexico is 5.125%. And we need to select all equations that represent the sales tax T, right? So tax is the variable T, right, that you would pay in New Mexico for an item of cost C. So the cost is represented by the variable C. I'm writing this here on the side so we know that what we're dealing with, okay? First off, we need to change this percent, this tax rate, to a decimal, right? What is 5.125% as a decimal? Think back to what we did up here. We knew we needed to move the decimal 2 places to the left. When I move this decimal 2 places to the left, I have a spot for a placeholder 0. That is 0.05125, right? So 5.125% is 0.05125 as a decimal. With that in mind, which of these is correct to determine the tax? Is the tax 5.125 times C? No, because this percent is 5.125%. It needs to be changed into a decimal for us to multiply it by C. So no. Okay. B, tax is 0.5125. C, well, is the 5 immediately after the decimal? No, they did not move the decimal enough places here. Okay, so C is correct. In this case, we're dividing the cost by the tax, and that's not what we do. We don't divide by the tax as a decimal, we multiply by it. And the last one, you have to recognize what 5.125 is over 100. Well, if we're dividing by 100, that simply means we're moving the decimal 2 places to the left, and we end up with this 0.05125. So E is correct. Alright, next one. It says, here are the prices of some items and the amount of sales tax charged on each in Nevada. Alright. This time they did not give me the tax rate. I need to find out what the tax rate is. Alright. I need to figure out what the tax rate is here. What is the sales tax rate in Nevada? Okay. The table says the cost of an item and how much money they paid in tax on each of those items. So if an item costs $10, they paid 0.46. They paid 46 cents in taxes. Okay, so they paid 46 cents was the tax out of the total. The total was $10. Okay, so 46 cents was the tax out of the total. So what is the tax rate then? If this is my fraction, what is this as a decimal? We know that a fraction means to divide, right? So 0.46 divided by 10, well, that only moves the decimal over one place. That only moves the decimal over one place to the left, right? Which you can verify that in your calculator. 0.46 divided by 10 does in fact move the decimal one place to the left. 0.046. That is my tax rate, right? But we know when we looked up here, a tax rate was a percent. So I need to take this decimal and turn it to a percent. How do I turn a decimal to a percent? Well, instead of moving to the left, I'm going to move to the right. How many places? 2. So 1, 2 gives me 4.6%. Okay, so I divided the tax by the total. Divided tax by total, and then I move the decimal twice to the right, which basically means I multiplied by 100. Okay, all right. Next, B says write an expression for the amount of sales tax charged in dollars on an item that costs C dollars, right? So we can look at our example of an equation here, right? Where the tax equals the rate in a decimal times the cost. Okay, so the tax equals, what is our tax rate as a decimal? 0.046. And that needs to be multiplied by the cost. So we need a variable for cost. Well, it says here that is C. Okay, thank you. All right. On the following page, question 4 is asking us to find each amount. So 3.8% of 25. Hopefully from the previous page, right? This is just helping us to remember that we need to first turn this percent into a decimal. Turn percent. I'll just do this. Percent to decimal and multiply. Okay? You can change this percent to a fraction. It would be, a number out of 100. Or we can just turn it to a decimal and multiply, especially if we have access to a calculator. All right. So 3.8 is the percent. We know that we move it 2 places to the left. So, and the placeholder here is 0. So that's 0.038 times 25 would give me the answer here, right? Moving this 2 places to the left, that would be 0.002 times 50, right? And then you should be able to do the same thing here, right? Move the decimal 2 places to the left and then multiply. All right, let's take a look at question 5. Question 5 says, on Monday, the high was 60 degrees Fahrenheit. On Tuesday, the high was 18% more. 18% more. How much did the high increase from Monday to Tuesday? So on Monday, the high was 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what we started at. So the 100% of the temperature was 60 degrees, right? Well, on Tuesday, it went 18% more than what it was on Monday, right? So 18% more means we're adding 18%. To what? Well, to the original 100%, right? We've done this with Double number lines, well, we understand that 100% plus 18% is 118%, right? What is 118% as a decimal? Well, we simply move the decimal 2 places to the left. That is 1.18 as a decimal, right? That's the decimal, okay? So now that I have this as a decimal, right, I'm going to multiply it by this temperature. So 60 times 1.18 will tell me what the temperature was on Tuesday. And that gives me 70.8 degrees. Okay, lastly, we're going to take a look at question 6, and it's asking us to complete the table and explain or show our reasoning. We're given objects here, the radius of each of those objects, so we know we must be talking about circles if they have a radius and the radius is halfway through the circle, right? It tells me that the ceiling fan is 2.8 feet. Well, if I'm taking tape, I know that I need to look at my math reference sheet, and I see that I'm dealing with or trying to find circumference, right? So looking at my math reference sheet, I have two formulas for circle. The first one says A equals, well, that's not circumference, that's area. The second one says C equals, and they gave me two different formulas. This is for circumference, right? So the first formula that I have is C equals pi times diameter, right here, right? D is diameter. Or, they didn't give me the diameter here. I could find the diameter by doubling it. But I could also just use the other formula, which is C equals pi times, 2 pi. So 2 times pi times the radius. 2 times pi times the radius, okay? So let's use that formula since we have radius, all right? C equals 2 pi r, okay? So C equals what? 2 times pi. Well, for pi, we can estimate 3.14, right? Times, what's the radius? 2.8. And you can use your calculator. 2 times 2.8, well, that's 5.6, right? 5.6 times 3.14, you can just go ahead and multiply it in order. 17.584. So I'm just going to round that up to 17.6. Now, sometimes they will ask you to just leave this in terms of pi, and in that case, it would be 2 times 3 or 2 times 2.8, which would be 5.6 pi. But I see here that they have rounded and estimated, gotten it to the approximated, I should say, instead of estimated, gotten an approximate circumference. So this is in terms of feet. That would be feet. Okay, the next one, circumference is 2 times, I'm going to use 3.14 as an approximation, times 13. And so if I wasn't approximating for pi, that would just be 2 times 13, which is 26 times pi, 26 pi. All right, but I'm going to approximate, so 26 times 3.14, and that gives me 81.64 millimeters. Okay. This time they gave me the circumference and I need to find the radius. And in order to get these numbers over here, I multiplied the radius times 2 and times 3.14. So to go in the opposite direction, instead of multiplying by 2 and times 3.14, this number needs to get smaller, right? These numbers get smaller from 81.64 to 13, from 17.6 to 2.8. So since I'm going the opposite direction, I need to do the opposite operation, which is divide. So I'm taking 56.5, and I'm dividing it by 2, and I'm dividing it by 3.14. Okay, and I got 8.99. I'm going to approximate that to about 9 centimeters. Okay, and I can double check. Right, 9 times 3.14 times 2 does give me 56.5. So I know I'm correct. Okay, same thing here, right? I'm going in the opposite direction. So instead of multiplying, I'm dividing. I'm taking 75.4 dividing that by 3.14, and dividing that by 2. And I get 12.006. So I'm just going to keep that at about 12 inches. That would round to. All right. Thank you.